seen record arrivals in some months, stronger even than pre-pandemic numbers in some months. So there is clearly a strong demand there, and that is helping, of course, to expedite the recovery.
Yes, and one of those months was April of this year, which actually bettered 2019, which was the record year here.
Yes.
There are some challenges, though, for the currency union and for Antigua and Barbuda in that recovery. What are those major ones, Governor?
Well, there's several. First of all is that we're still obviously grappling with inflation. You will recall during the pandemic, we saw a hike in prices as a result of disruption in supply chains. Those eased, and then came the war in Ukraine and related sanctions. And that particular situation has exacerbated, and in some cases, so you think about the cost of energy, fertilizer, some grains, like food. Ukraine is a big, big producer of grains in the world, and fertilizer, and the input for fertilizer. That has had a deleterious effect. That has pushed inflation. So we are grappling with inflation. A little light, a little ray of hope is the fact that in the United States, inflation is coming down. Earlier this week, the US reported for May, year on year, inflation is now down to 4%. In April, year on year, it was 5%. That is the lowest inflation in 2 years. As you know, the Fed, the central bank in the United States, is targeting 2%. They want to get inflation down to 2%. So it's coming down, not fast enough for any one of us, but it's coming down. The US inflation is important because we track the US.
Absolutely.
Because of imported inflation. So when you see inflation coming down in the US, that is a good sign for us in the currency union. So we're seeing inflation starting to come down, but clearly not fast enough.
In terms of this year, you mentioned inflation as one of the big challenges, certainly, following the COVID-19 pandemic. In Antigua and Barbuda, it reached around about a little over 9% last year. First of all, for the currency union, what's the target range for inflation? What's the target range for Antigua?
We don't have a target rate, and the reason why we don't have a target rate is because we import most of our inflation. So to have a target rate is to suggest we can control inflation. We cannot. And I've said before, if we could bring inflation down, we, being the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, we would. We would. We can't. So when I met the Fed chairman last year, I said, please, bring it down as fast as you can. We're dependent on you. I said the very same thing to the New York Fed president as well, John Williams. They have to bring it down. So the action of the major central banks in the world, particularly the US, is important for us in the Caribbean and in the currency union. The rates that ECCB controls are the minimum savings rate, the discount rate, so the minimum savings rate is the rate you get paid for your savings in our banks.
That's 2%.
That's 2%. The discount rate, which is a rate that the central bank lends to governments and banks, that's 2% for up to 1 year, 3.5% for over 1 year and up to 15 years. Minimum savings rate, discount rate. And the third rate is the exchange rate itself, the peg, 1 US to 2.7. Those are the three rates controlled by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Everything else is external.
Wow.
So we cannot, on our own, bring inflation down. If we could, we would.
Indeed. We're going to come back to the challenges shortly, Governor. Just going back to the performance, the fiscal performance of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union and your projections for this year and next. You mentioned the strong performance of Antigua and Barbuda's tourism and construction. When you compare Antigua and Barbuda with the rest of the countries in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, how is it looking in terms of growth?
Antigua is growing faster. So, as I said, for this year and next year, whereas we're seeing, like, say, around 5% in the currency union, we're seeing around 9% in Antigua and Barbuda. So it's definitely growing faster than the average growth in the currency union.
Apart from the average, is there any other country in the currency union likely to grow faster than Antigua? Or is Antigua at the top of the...
So some of the countries are at different stages in the recovery. So for example, Anguilla, a very strong tourism country, is coming back very strongly on tourism. Again, so you have the leaders in tourism like Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, St. Lucia. Those tend to be our most tourism dependent, our largest, St. Kitts and Nevis. Others are in tourism as well, but those tend to be our biggest tourism economies. So we're seeing strong numbers in those countries. But in terms of growth performance on average, Antigua and Barbuda is growing faster than the average.
What I'm trying to get at, apart from the average, is Antigua the fastest growing, the fastest recovering in the currency union?
Based on the numbers that we're seeing, yes.
Okay. In terms of the size of the country's economy, in terms of nominal GDP, because you reported to Cabinet on that when you met with them yesterday, 5 billion? It has reached
size
that?
up, yes. So this economy now, Antigua and Barbuda, is around 5 billion EC dollars, correct.
Where does that put it in the currency union?
So it is just behind St. Lucia in terms of size. So St. Lucia accounts for about 24% of the currency union. Antigua and Barbuda accounts for 22% in the currency union.
But when you look at the size of Antigua and Barbuda, that's punching much above its weight, isn't it?
Yes, but you know, Antigua and Barbuda is entrepreneurial. I mean, you were the first in tourism, were you not? And so you've always had that entrepreneurial spirit, I suppose. And so now what we're also seeing is that you are, obviously through consolidation, the banks in Antigua and Barbuda have been growing. In fact, 3 of your banks here are in the top 10 largest banks in the currency union. So ECAB is 3rd. Then you have ACB. That's 9th, I believe. And then we have FCIB. That's 10th. So the top 10 largest banks, Antigua and Barbuda has 3 banks. And more than size, of course, size is not unimportant, I think is the fact that after the banking crisis in Antigua and Barbuda, you remember 2014, 2015, and even before that, 2009, the banking sector here has come back very strongly, is robust, is sound, is stable, and obviously is growing. And the growth obviously has to do with the banks, the acquisitions, ECAB of Scotia, ACB of RBC, and of course, other perhaps developments. But principally, those 2 acquisitions. We've had, of course, acquisition in other member countries as well. So the indigenous banks as a whole now control almost 70% of all banking assets in the currency union. If you look at 3-4 years ago, that number was probably 45%. Today, it's almost 70%. So we've seen a shift as a result of the bank consolidation in the currency union.
Indeed, and that's an important point. That was seen by many to be one of the game changers, those acquisitions. Prime Minister Brown, for example, the finance minister here, would see that as a vindication of his own push to have those the indigenous banks acquire those foreign banks. Let me ask you, in terms of coming back to the challenges, so it's great that there has been this recovery in the currency union and in Antigua and Barbuda, but of course those challenges are presenting significant headwinds, as the IMF says, as you also say. Apart from inflation, what are the biggest other risks facing this recovery?
Multiple risks. So climate, always, it's an existential threat. So always we have to be mindful of the climate risks. Of course, we're in the hurricane season. So that never goes away. That risk is there, we have to manage it. And of course, you know, we have the vulnerability, we know where we live, we have to address that vulnerability. Then there are other things like the whole question, of course, of cybersecurity. We are going digital, we have to, that's the direction the world is going, and there are great opportunities there. But of course, we also have to recognize there are risks which have to be managed, one of which is cybersecurity. There's the issue of crime. Crime is a concern. Crime is a concern. We are still relatively very safe countries, but we have seen an increase in crime, especially, you know, youth-related violence. That's a concern for us. It's a concern not just in terms of the economy, but our society, who we are as a people, homes, families, the future of our countries in respect of our youth. So that, you know, so this is not just economics. we have socioeconomic issues to concern ourselves with. We have unemployment challenges, especially amongst our youth, where in many of our countries, youth unemployment doubles the national average. So if the national average is, say, 15%, youth would be 30%. That's a concern. And very often, not only does it show in terms of economic output or lack thereof, but it manifests itself in social pathologies such as crime and deviant behavior. So, I mean, I mentioned a couple. There are a whole lot of things. I mean, I could get into skills. Don't get me started on that because that's a
and human
huge
capacity
issue.
And so
Yeah, because you can't grow these economies sustainably without the requisite skills. And I've always said, we lose more in critical skills through brain drain than we gain from remittances. As important as remittances are, they can never compensate or replace the loss of critical skills. And in many cases, both in the public and private sectors in our region, we are struggling or not moving as fast as we could or should because of the dearth of critical skills. And that is something that we have to address as a region going forward. The good news is, if I may add some good news, because I don't want to lament on that too much, is the fact that with the new world of work, the capacity to work from anywhere in the world, work from home, work from your country of birth, our hope is that we will see more Antiguan and Barbudans, more citizens of the ECCU in the diaspora come home and work here at home because they have an opportunity with an employer in the US, Canada, or the UK to work from home. Think about what that could be in terms of bringing back additional skills, but also in terms of economic activity from the presence, even if not for the entire year, but 6 months or a significant period of the year. That's something we have to explore more purposefully, I think, as a currency union, to get some skills back. They may not be working directly in the country for an employer in the country, but they could, through their presence, provide skills, provide additional support, provide voluntary work, consult. Their presence would help.
knowledge transfer and so on.
Knowledge transfer, they can mentor.
Yes.
Their presence would help. So we have to look for ways to tap our diaspora, and I'm hoping more of them can work from home, as in Antigua and Barbuda or the currency union, and therefore give us more of themselves. And we have to challenge their patriotic passions and responsibilities. So, well, if you know they're making some money for a while, come home for a bit. And maybe you could still make some money, but working from home. Of course, there are other things that they will be concerned about. Healthcare. Healthcare would be important. Because very often when you're thinking about coming back, you're concerned about whether or not you can access adequate healthcare. On that note, I was very pleased a couple of days ago while I was watching ABS, while doing some exercise in the morning, to see a gentleman talking about the transient dialysis now available.
Indeed.
That was a great, I found that very encouraging.
Dr.
Right.
Cooper, yes.
Because locals and tourists can come home, Antigua and Barbuda, with a certain knowledge that they can get treatment while here. That's a very important addition, I think, not just to healthcare, but the tourism product as well. I was very pleased when I saw that service now being offered here.
Health tourism as well.
Very
We're going to take a break shortly, but before, I mean, so much to talk about, so much to unpack with Governor Antoine. When we have him, for example, on one of those one-to-one discussions like this, I mean, there's an opportunity to unpack so many issues. I mean, it's almost an embarrassment of riches of the issues that we can discuss. But before we go to the break, Governor, the issue on the risks, I want to talk about the global slowdown. The IMF speaks about the possibility, the risk of a global slowdown. It speaks of this as one of the downside risks. It says higher food and fuel prices are driving up inflation, eroding real incomes, and exacerbating, as I said, fiscal and external imbalances. And it mentions the risk of a global growth slowdown, tighter global financial conditions, lower CIP revenues, etc., natural disasters. How real is the threat of a global recession, in your view?
Well, we were very concerned at the start of the year that the world was going to go into a recession. That has not materialized. And I said then, we were not projecting a recession for the currency union. I maintain that position today. So yes, there has been a slowing, but the US has not slowed as fast as some thought it would. The economy has shown itself to be far more robust. If you saw the job numbers a couple weeks ago, far exceeded expectations,
Absolutely.
339,000 or whatever it was. So the point is the job market is still hot, as they would say, the labor market. So the slowdown, while there has been a slowdown, it has not been as fast as. And at the moment, there's still a debate about whether the US might eventually hit a recession. There is a feeling that if it does, it will be shallow, not prolonged, but we don't know. The truth is we really don't know. I think that is still to be seen. But clearly, the US economy is showing itself to be far more robust than was initially suggested. And Europe itself has also not slowed down as much as. In fact, there was a projection that in Europe there would have been a slowdown, and in the UK there would have been a recession by now. The last numbers coming out of the UK suggested that it grew by about 0.5%. So not even the UK, with all of its challenges, Brexit included, is in a recession at this point in time. So I think a global recession is not something that is imminent, still possible, but we have to see. And then, the geopolitical events can easily overtake us and put it in any direction. The price of oil could change with a geopolitical event. There are other things. At the moment, the global economy is expected to actually pick up next year.
So the risks have receded a bit.
The risks have receded. And to the extent that inflation gets under control, then that will help. Having said that, again, the picture is nuanced and you have to be careful because China has seen a slowdown. And in fact, I think they recently the central bank in China cut rates to try to stave off a further slowing of the Chinese economy. Why is that important? Because China drives growth in the global economy. China is a powerhouse, as you know.
Ask you about China.
Yeah. So you have to watch that because China is not growing as fast. Even though they've come out of the lockdown, the zero COVID policy, they're not seeing the growth as fast as. So again, you have to keep watching all of these things. For us, we always start with the US because it's our major trading partner and our dollar is pegged to the US dollar. And so we monitor that very closely. But you have to also look at the rest of the globe. And the geopolitics is very interesting and can go in any direction.
Absolutely. The shifting sands of geopolitics are extraordinary. One last point before we go to the break, Governor. The issue of the loss of correspondent banking relations. Perhaps you would have answered part of it when you mentioned the strength of the indigenous banking sector, because the indigenous banks are becoming stronger and better capitalized. Has that receded? Has that caused a kind of receding of the risk of the loss of correspondent banking?
The threat is still there, but it has receded. In other words, we've not seen too many additional terminations. We've had one or two, but not a whole lot. Because our indigenous banks are stronger, larger, have more financial muscle, they're better able to negotiate correspondent banking relations. So we've had, in fact, in some cases, we've seen a couple of the correspondent banks renew interest in doing business with our indigenous banks. So our larger indigenous banks have 2 or 3 correspondent banks. Having said that, we have to remain vigilant. And that is why, the AML-CFT protocols are important. But that is also the reason why I think at times we've gone a little overboard to the extent where we have problems opening a bank account, for example. And perhaps we could get into that after the break. But the situation with the correspondent banking is stable at this moment.
Stable. All right, you heard that from the governor. That has been a major thorny issue for quite a long time. These large correspondent banks in Europe and North America cutting the link, de-risking they call it, from the smaller respondent banks in the region. The governor says that risk has receded a bit. This is now a stable situation. But so much more to unpack with the governor when we come back from this break. So let's talk about the EC dollar. Should there be a change of the way the dollar looks so that we remove Queen Elizabeth II, the late Queen Elizabeth II, and replace the portrait with King Charles III? Is that on the bank's radar at this point? Plus, this issue of digital currency. There is a big discussion in some quarters that perhaps we're moving away from cash to a digital society, to a cashless society. Is that on the bank's radar? What does Governor Antoine have to say about that? And also this thorny issue. Should the governor and the bank increase the minimum saving rate? 2% on your money? Should you get more? What are the considerations? What are the ramifications if you were to get more? What are the different discussions that are being held? Much more with Governor Timothy Antoine. A lot to unpack. We're discussing your money here on ABS. A powerful program. Stay with us.
The future is here. Everybody must be aware. The cash taking easy digital. You don't need to use money physically. You could use your phone to send, receive, and so much more. The cash safer, faster, cheaper, so get it up on your mobile phone. Everybody rolling now with the cash. Everybody rolling now with the cash. Everybody rolling now with the cash. We spending easy dollars digitally, rolling now with the cash. Everybody rolling now with the cash. Everybody rolling now with the cash. We spending easy dollars digitally.
The easy dollar is digital. Make payments safer, faster, and cheaper with Dcash. ABS Radio 90.5 FM. Your carnival station.
No,
We're in the carnival zone, and it's time for Talking Calypso. Your host, Alex, the big one, Nicholas. The writers, the arrangers, the artists. New 2023 releases. Join host Alex, the big one, Nicholas, for Talking Calypso.
We love our fathers.
I love you, Daddy. I love Daddy.
The Medical Benefit Scheme presents its special Father's Day fitness walk from MBS headquarters to Hawksbill Beach on Sunday, 18th June 2023. Starting time is 3:30 p.m. with warm-up at 3:25 p.m. Come walk alongside Dad and bring along the entire family for good health and good vibes. There will be prizes for the first youngest father, first oldest father, and first child to cross the finish line. There will also be a prize for the largest family, but it must include Dad. And stick around for a special Father's Day lip sync contest. Registration is free. Just wear an old MBS t-shirt and invite the entire family. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more info. Bring your daddy, bring your father, bring Papa, and come.
We're having a conversation with the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Timothy Antoine. He is here in Antigua and Barbuda as part of his country outreach mission, 2023 country outreach mission. Several discussions the governor has had so far with top officials. He's been to the T.N. Cronin School. He's engaged in several activities, as we said, but the visit would not be complete unless and until the governor actually sat here with us in the studios of ABS Television to have a conversation. And that's what he's doing this evening. Of course, you'll be able to weigh in on our discussion as well on our social media platforms or call or WhatsApp a bit later on. So have your questions ready. For example, somebody was messaging me earlier today to mention a few things that just in case they didn't get to call in, they wanted us to raise with the governor as well about the issues of banking, commercial banking, and so on in this country. We'll get to that issue of audience participation later. But Governor, thank you so much for staying with us. But before we continue, just another quick issue of the fiscal macroeconomic indicators in the region. Debt to GDP. How is the region doing with managing its debt? And how is Antigua and Barbuda comparing?
Right. So as a target, we target 60% debt to GDP ratio, 60%. Before COVID, at the end of 2019, we were, as a currency union, at 66%. After the shock of COVID 2020, we saw that jump to 88%, from 66 to 88. Now that the recovery has begun, the debt to GDP ratio is slowly coming down. So it came down to actually 70-something, 78, 79. This year it's going to drop to probably mid-70s. So we have a ways to go to get back and to get on track. But we've seen countries starting to lower. Antigua is 90-something percent. It was over 100 at one point in time. It has come back down under 100, but clearly has some ways to go to get close to and under 60%. And so you need a combination of growth, and obviously you also have to manage debt going forward.
Indeed, because of course there's a numerator and a denominator.
Correct,
with
that is
indeed,
correct.
Indeed. Let's look at some money matters, Governor. So are there any plans to change the way the Eastern Caribbean dollar looks to take away the portrait of the late Queen Elizabeth II replaced with King Charles III?
King Charles III?
Yes.
No. So we do anticipate there will eventually be a change on the image, on our currency. We expect that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, now deceased, will eventually be no more on the currency, and that we will replace her image with appropriate images that better reflect the people of the currency union. So whether that is our heroes, whether that is our landmarks, important symbols, that is for us to decide. And the Monetary Council will ultimately make that decision. The Monetary Council are all our finance ministers in the currency union. And I can tell you that we will be bringing a paper at the next council meeting to begin a process for us to come to a determination of what will be on our currency next. But I think I've heard very clearly from our membership that there is no appetite for us to continue with the British monarch on our currency. And I think we will see more images in our image and likeness, I would say, on our currency in due course.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people are thinking about some of the things and some of the people and things and places that possibly should go on the currency.
Correct. And let's be clear, we do have landmarks now. They're not as prominent. But if you look at our 5 notes, or family of notes, in every country, so whether it's the Dockyard here, whether it's the Pitons in St. Lucia, whether it's the Nutmeg in Grenada, whether it's Trafalgar Falls in Dominica, you have landmarks, but we may want to make them more prominent. We may want to consider additional landmarks, flowers, heroes. There are options. Right. I think we have a lot of options to choose from, if you ask me. We have 8 countries. We're not short on options. We will figure that out.
Indeed. But by when? What's the timeline you're looking at? You mentioned, taking a paper to the next Monetary Council meeting, but beyond that?
It's going to be years. We're talking years because we have still in stock very new notes, newly minted notes that have not yet been issued. We spent very good money for those notes. They are beautiful notes, polymer notes. We can't destroy those. They have significant value. We're going to use those. So we have probably still about 3 years in stock, maybe. So it will be after that stock ends. You won't see a new stock. We won't mint new notes with the same arrangements. So it is years before we will see that change because we have to run down and run out our existing stock. But in due course, when we give our next order for new notes, they will be different from what we have now.
I was looking at the KPMG audit for 2022 as at the end of March 2022, and one of the things that it mentioned was that your currency expenses would have increased in 2022 vis-a-vis 2021. Was that because of the polymer notes?
So yeah, we had it. Well, no, in 2019, it fluctuates depending on when we have new orders coming in. We introduced polymer in 2019. That was an upfront expense. Right. But over the next 10 years, because of polymer, we will save about $30 million.
30 million?
30, yeah. Because polymer lasts longer than the cotton or paper notes. Polymer actually lasts 2.5, 3 times longer. So we're actually saving money over time. So it's an upfront expense when you change over. And remember, it's not just polymer, but we had new security features. And you have to keep evolving with security on notes. So the next time you see the notes, not only will you see new notes, not only will you see different images, but you will see enhanced security features. Because you can't always have to try to stay a step ahead, of course, and we're committed to doing that. Yeah.
Let's go back to the issue of your financials and from the KPMG audit. For the year ended 31st March 2022, net loss of just over 49 million in 2022 compared to 25.16 in the black in 2021. What accounts for that?
The aggressive rate hikes by the Fed. So I'm glad you asked because it's important that we have to be accountable always and fully transparent. The central bank made a loss at the end of March 2022 and a loss at the end of March 2023, 2 consecutive years, because of the aggressive rate hikes by the Fed. So let me explain briefly. When the Fed moves interest rates up that quickly, when interest rates rise, the price of treasuries fall. We are very conservative with our accounting. So we have what is called mark-to-market or fair market treatment accounting. Essentially, when interest rates rise, the price falls, we take a loss. That's just an action by the Fed. That is nothing.
It's out of your hands.
It's out of our hands. And initially, of course, interest rates were very low. Interest rates are now very high. They're 5% and potentially could rise even higher. So now, this new financial year started April 23. We are enjoying the benefits of these higher interest rates. So we're back in the black in this financial year, which started April 2023. And I can tell you, as of today, for the first few weeks, we already have $13 million in profit already for the first 2 months. So investment losses occurred because of the rate hikes, and not just increased, they aggressively increased. So we had to reflect those in our accounts, and that is what explained the losses. But you will see a strong rebound in the profitability of the bank this year. So this is April 2023 to March 2024.
And in relation to, of course, these were rate hikes to battle inflation because central banks around the world were significantly raising interest rates to contain inflation.
Correct.
Perhaps the only country in the world that was going the opposite way was Turkey. They were actually dropping interest rates to fight inflation. Very, very strange logic anyway. The issue of, what was the impact of that, of these losses?
No, well, we had our balance sheet is strong. So, I mean, we absorbed the losses. Okay. We took them in our general reserves. We basically drew down on our general reserves. Okay. Because prior to that, for the 5 years prior to that, we were making very good profits. 2020 was a record year for the bank in terms of profitability. We were putting all of those into our reserves, general reserves. We're building that up. So when we have a year of loss, we take it from our reserves. When we have profit, we put it back in our reserves. So that's why capital is important for the rainy day, to absorb a shock, to absorb a loss. It's actually the same principle with commercial banks. You tell banks, maintain capital to have the capacity to absorb a loss for whatever, whether it's a COVID situation or hurricane situation or whatever. And so we have absorbed those, and we're now replenishing our general reserves with the new profits coming in.
That you're making. Interesting. So here's a $64,000 question or $64 million question, depending on how you look at it, Governor. The 2%, and that was, my understanding is from about 2015 you had it at 2%, however long it was.
2013.
2013, there you go. 2% minimum saving rate. Isn't that too low, Governor? Is it time to raise it?
It's one of the highest in the Caribbean. It's one of the highest in the Caribbean. And the reason why it's not low is because the Monetary Council, on our recommendation, has kept it at 2%. So if you recall, it was 3% in 2013, and it came down to 2%. The truth of the matter is that in most countries in the world, there is no minimum savings rate. That rate is determined by the market, supply and demand. In our situation, deposits have been growing faster than loans. So the banks have excess liquidity. So if we stepped away and said, we are liberalizing this market, the central bank will not interfere. You would be getting, I would be getting less than 1% on our savings in our banks.
Just because the banks have more money than...
Because they're extra liquid. Deposits are rising faster than loans. So if you go look around the region, you go to Trinidad, Barbados, savings is less than 1%. Now, there has been an argument made by many in the past that we should lower the rate even further to help the banks to bring down their mortgage rates and to bring down the rates they charge on loans. But as we've said before, and I repeat tonight, the driver of interest rates in the region is not the central bank. It is competition among the banks, and of late the credit unions, which have joined the competition. Indeed. So if you think about a mortgage in Antigua and Barbuda, there was a time when a mortgage was in excess of 10%. Today you can get a mortgage anywhere between 5%, 6%, 7% max. Mortgages have come down. The rates have come down. The rates are actually lower than in the United States. A mortgage in the United States now, a 30-year mortgage is 6.7%. It was over 7. It's probably come down to about 6.7%. That's higher than in the region.
There's no appetite to go higher than 2% because it's actually much higher than elsewhere. No. We won't. We can't do that. That would be a distortion. And so, if anything, over time, that rate is likely to go down, not up. But we said to our people, you have other options you also need to consider.
we are very good savers in the region, but not so good financial investors. In Antigua and Barbuda, you have over $5 billion in savings in the banking system here.
Billion with a B.
5 billion.
Wow.
5 billion. It's more than 5 billion, $5.1 billion. And that's growing. At the currency union wide, at the currency union level, it's $25 billion in savings. But then here's the thing. When you ask how many people in our region are investing in the market, financial markets, that's 4%, 1 in 25. In the United States, it's 60%. 3 in 5 persons in the US invest in the stock market. It's a perennial source of wealth creation. And so our argument is that rather than simply look at the 2% in the bank, I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. You need to put some money there, but also explore using the market. Recently, a mutual fund was launched, and we want to see more people investing in mutual funds, you know, and other options where you can earn a bit more for your hard-earned dollars without taking undue risk. By the way, you may or may not get into that, but I mean, I see that we're taking a lot of risk with cryptos.
We're going to talk about that.
And I'm saying you could do something a little less risky by investing in the markets through these mutual funds, for example. But we have, as a region, we have not tapped that sufficiently. Only 4% of our people, that's not, I'd like to see that jump to 20% over the next 10 years. From 1 in 25 to 1 in 5. That would be my challenge. And we have to work towards financial literacy, getting people to understand these options, and understanding that saving is good, that's a start, but you can also become an investor. Yes, you can do real estate and you can do a business. Those are also options for investing. But there's the financial sector, the financial markets.
Yes.
And we want to see more of our people also tapping into that market.
A kind of money market section of the.
Correct.
We're going to come to more of those issues. We're going to come to digital currency, the Dcash, Governor. We'll talk about cryptocurrencies. We'll talk about as well whether or not there is a huge conspiracy to cut out cash and go all digital. We're going to talk about that as well, because there's a big discussion in some parts, including here in the Caribbean, that central banks are in on this thing to go digital and to go to a cashless society and track people so that everything you do will be tracked. They have it on some sort of ledger or something. We're going to talk about that with the governor as well. Let's take a WhatsApp question. If we'll put that up shortly. Here's a WhatsApp. Will there be a need to peg to an additional currency along with the USD now that BRICS have come to the forefront? BRICS meaning Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which is, of course, the other bloc, which is the kind of counterpole of the US. So are you looking to peg to another currency other than the US? Not
at this point in time, but it's an appropriate question to ask.
Indeed.
I think with what we're seeing...
Governor, could you hold,
sure.
please? There's another part of the question, and then you could respond
yes.
to both. What are your thoughts on this with respect to monetary authority? What are your thoughts on this? Right. Will there possibly be a need to do so with one of these countries that are part of BRICS, possibly Chinese currency, yuan?
Right. So not at this point in time. And here's why. We are mindful that there are attempts to reduce global dominance or global reliance on the US dollar as a dominant or the reserve currency. And we've seen some reduction over time. But the truth of the matter is, let's be practical. The US is our major trading partner. Much of what we import comes from the US. To pay for these imports, we need US dollars. Hard currency, US dollars. That's not going to change. We need US dollars. So unless China becomes our major trading partner, then the discussion starts to change because you need a different currency to pay for imports. We still have to pay for imports. Much of what we consume, including our food, we import. Second, our debt. Our external debt is 85% of that debt is denominated in US dollars. So again, you need US dollars to pay for your debt. We can't escape that. So we must hold US dollars. That's the point I'm making. Some of these other countries that you see are moving in that direction have different relationships.
Yes.
They have stronger relations with China, for example. They may be doing more trade with China, so they may be holding more money, currency in Chinese, the yuan or the renminbi. But in our case, we have to look at our arrangement. Who is our major trading partner? Where our bills have to be paid from or to? What denomination, what currency do we have to pay these bills in? And the overwhelming answer is it's still the USD. So that is a main reason, a compelling reason why we have to continue to hold US dollars.
So it's pragmatism, not ideology.
Correct, correct. But we monitor that geopolitical development closely, of course.
Okay, all right. By the way, it's 4622996, that's the number to call, 4622996, or WhatsApp number as well. I'll tell you that so that you're also able to call on WhatsApp as well. Plus, or YouTube, Facebook, so many ways to reach us. If you don't want to call 4622996 and engage with the governor, we'd much prefer you to call and actually engage with the governor. But those are the ways to call us. The call is 4622996. WhatsApp is 788-8755. So send your question or comment on WhatsApp 788-8755. But as I said, we much prefer you call 4622996. Also on our YouTube and ECCB Connects, as well as our ABS YouTube and ABS Facebook as well. So many ways to contact us as well. So is there a grand design, Governor, to go towards a cashless society so that you can track people more and possibly get them to, you know, not use cash, but go on some sort of broader technical platform or digital platform?
There is no aim, plan, or design by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to eliminate cash. So let me be very clear. We have said we believe it is important to reduce our use of physical cash. Not eliminate, reduce. Why do we say that? Because we recognize that large sums of physical cash pose a risk, a security risk for our people. We cannot be oblivious to crime. I have said it is important that people anywhere in our currency union, at any time of the day or night, have some sense of safety, security about being able to make a lime in the bar in your rural area, in your community, or in your usual spot, your popular spot, without feeling threatened, neither the patron or the proprietor. So you want to give people those opportunities, and how you reduce that risk to some extent is to use digital channels, for example. The fact of the matter is we are tourism-dependent economies. You will find tourists are coming with less physical cash for the very same reason, and they will come with cards. And they will come with wallets, which we have to be able to transact. Yes. And if we're not ready, we are going to lose the sale or miss the business. It's that simple. There are some places where you go now, they simply will not accept cash for the same security reason. What people don't understand, I know psychologically and culturally, we like the idea of having our notes and pulling our notes and feeling them. You know, we feel like a man or a big woman or a big man when we use our notes and so on. Indeed. But the reality is that notes are expensive to store and to secure. People don't see that. I think people in business, after a while, if they pay attention, will recognize it. But that's the reality. Storing and securing physical cash is expensive.
The cost of money.
The cost.
Indeed.
And then there's a risk. So that is a motivation, not to track people and to, you know, it's convenience. And frankly, your security and safety. That is paramount for us.
Indeed. Governor, please hold the point. We're going to go to the telephone lines now. Good evening, caller. Thank you so much for joining us on Conversation with the Governor. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
Sir.
Good evening.
Yes, thank you for your intervention, sir. You're coming at the right time, at the right moment. I'm not really a financial person, really, but I follow the old school. Like my mother, you know, she taught us to save a little and spend a little, and save up for rainy days. You know, the old time method.
Good advice.
And
yes.
I adapted that. I'm 63 years old now. I'm a pensioner, and it worked for me because I don't. I reach a stage right now. I don't even have to touch my pension. You come and stay there, and I don't have to go into my pension money because I save a lot in the latter days, you know, and you pay that for me now.
Very good.
What I'm questioning here, would you believe that if you have a pandemic and you're heavily dependent on government and government should bail out and whatnot? I don't subscribe to that, you know, because we should have a responsibility, you know, in our financial situation. You understand? And most government around the world and whatnot When things hard, they depend to lean on government. And, what's your suggestion on that?
Well, I absolutely thank you, Colin.
Thanks for the call.
Yeah, and let me say congrats to you. That's a wonderful place to be in, where you have financial freedom because you have set aside for the rainy day. Those are fundamental financial principles that everybody should know and should practice. The government must always be there for the most vulnerable among us. And there are times when people fall into vulnerability, a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, whatever, and there are moments when you lean on family and even the state to help you get through. But all of us must have personal responsibility for our finances. It's funny that people don't want to pay taxes, but they have an expectation of everything from the government, including concessions or exemptions from tax. And I know this is a thorny issue, but we have to be very honest with each other here, Garfield. Antigua has one of the lowest tax efforts, has the lowest tax effort in the region, not one of the lowest. It's nice to say you have low tax, but then Antigua and Barbuda also has one of the highest payables, as in arrears to domestic suppliers in the currency union. We have to resolve that. These people need to be paid. So there has to be an honest conversation about what is the appropriate tax structure for Antigua and Barbuda to ensure that people are paid in a reasonable time frame without, of course, overtaxing the nation.
Indeed.
And I think those discussions need to be had. So to the caller, yes, you're right. We need to put aside a little bit for the rainy day. We need to be able to help ourselves and others in times of need, and the state must always be there to provide for safety nets for the vulnerable among us. But this over-reliance on the state is something that we have to watch. I see a trend where these safety nets seem to be getting larger and larger, and not all of them are particularly well targeted. And this is a general comment I make of the currency union, so not specific to Antigua and Barbuda. But I think everywhere, including here, you need to look at your safety nets, make sure they're properly targeted. You need to look at exemptions from taxes and make sure that you collect some more so that you can pay the small man when his bill is presented to the Treasury.
In other words,
the small man has a family too.
Indeed.
And a business to run. So we have to get that balance right.
In other words, there can't be welfare states in the ECCU.
Or as Lloyd Best used to put it, nanny states.
There you go. All right, perhaps leave that to the Scandinavian countries, right? Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good evening, caller. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, please.
If you'd like to make a call.
Oh, geez, so sorry, we missed that call. So 4622996, please call us back, 4622996. Here's a WhatsApp question. Well, 3 decades ago, we used to get permission to buy US dollars, and given to the purpose of the money, the finance minister would decide whether to grant you permission to buy all you need or some. There was therefore a very lucrative black market selling US dollars. Fast forward to today, we go online and purchase goods and services in US dollars without any care. I think there's another part of that. That's coming up next. How long will this last? And do you foresee a future where we would have to place foreign exchange measures to limit the outflow of our US dollars or foreign exchange?
No, I don't foresee that at this time. So the caller the person is referring to the days when we had foreign exchange controls, when we had Form E's or whatever you call it here, where you had to get approval. You're traveling, you need foreign currency, you have to go to the Treasury or wherever, and you have to get the thing stamped and then go to the bank and get your foreign. We eliminated that a long time ago, 20 years or whatever, how long it is now. I don't remember the exact year, but foreign exchange controls were removed. That's a powerful testament to the strength of our EC dollar and how far we've come. There are countries larger than us in the Caribbean, in CARICOM, where you still have to get permission, where you have foreign exchange controls. We do not. And caller, we do not anticipate imposing that again. Those times have long gone, and thankfully our dollar remains strong. Even with the pandemic, we weathered the storm very well. The EC dollar remains very strong. And so that's one of the blessings of a strong EC dollar. You can get foreign currency. As the caller said, you go online, you go on Amazon, click, you buy, you're using foreign currency. You don't get permission from anyone.
Not even a thought about it. Right. By the way, the reserve ratio is still about 97%. The backing ratio?
It came down. It came down during the COVID. It came down to 89, 90. It's now back up to almost 92, okay. And it's rising again.
Okay, all right. So the backing is strong for the dollar.
And the law says 60%, so we are well above the requirement in the law.
Indeed. Let's go back to the telephone. I think this is the caller that we missed a while ago. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening.
Sure.
Mr.
Antoine.
Central Bank. I realize that you're speaking on the behalf of the Central Bank. But then we are on a digital path where we have, one can open a digital account and do not have a bank account. Are you aware of that, sir?
Am I aware that you have a what account? Could you repeat that, caller?
One can open a digital account
Yes.
and not having a bank account. Are you aware of that?
He says one can open a digital account and not have a bank account.
In our banks, I'm trying to follow you. Go ahead and maybe I'll follow you as you continue. You can have an account online. Yes, that's fine.
Are you aware of which is the first legal digital currency in the Western Hemisphere? I said legal.
He's asking if you remember the first legal digital
So
currency.
the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is the first currency union in the world to issue a digital currency. That is fact, and one of the very first central banks, period, to issue a digital currency. And I want to be very clear, a digital currency is not a cryptocurrency. A digital currency for us is the same EC dollar issued in digital form. Same backing with the same reserves and the same balance sheet of the central bank.
Well, I'm saying to you, independent digital currency that have from a central digital standpoint. I'm not talking about a conversion of the EC dollar that you make mention of just now. Are you aware of which currency is that, sir, and which country has the first legal digital currency with a digital central bank backing?
Yeah, caller, could you get to the point? What exactly are you asking of me? I want to understand your question. Please.
Take it easy, sir. Don't do that. That's not nice. Jamaica is the first legal, Jamdex of Jamaica is the first legal digital currency in the Western Hemisphere.
But that is not correct.
And
that's the point I made.
The information is there, sir. So can I speak and then you speak after?
But caller, we're running out of time, though. Caller.
That's one part of it. Though we have the BRIC school. Are you aware
caller,
of the
may I say this?
countries right at this point?
Caller, may I ask you to just ensure that you make it the point as concise as possible, please, because we have other callers, we have other ways for people to reach us. Just make your point as concise as possible, please. Thank you.
Burford.
Okay.
There's a number of countries that now align with BRICS. And this new development bank by the BRICS countries, that is in Shanghai. And they have the CBDC, which is Central Bank Digital Currencies. So all those countries, as they de-dollarize, they move away from the fiat currency and now move into the digital form of their currency. And they are now setting up they now have, from their central bank, they now set a date for the 22nd of August, 2023, where they will have, they will meet in South Africa, and they will have, in their meeting, they will discuss the replacement of the US dollar as the world reserve currency and a new order.
Okay, all right, thanks, caller. Really appreciate it. We're going to get Governor to respond. Thank you so much. We'll have to probably get you back another time because we're running out of time. Yes, Governor. I think he was talking about the move away from the US.
Yeah, so let's just be factual here. The Bahamas, with the sand dollar, was actually the first country in the world to issue a digital currency. The Bahamas. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank was the second country or central bank in the Caribbean to issue a central bank digital currency, and the first monetary union, because we are a monetary union. Jamaica is the third country in the Caribbean to issue a digital currency. In fact, before Jamaica issued a digital currency, Jamaica consulted with us because we had gone before. So I just wanted the facts to be very clear. And you can easily verify what I just said. Jamdex is the third central bank digital currency in the Caribbean. With respect to the meetings that he's referring to, we are aware, as we spoke earlier, of the discussion going on with the BRICS. As I said, for reasons that remain very clear and are compelling, we will need to continue to hold US dollars in the region. And I also believe, notwithstanding the moves by the BRICS, the US dollar for the foreseeable future will continue to be the dominant currency. One of the reasons for that is because the United States is the largest financial market in the world. It's the most liquid. And with interest rates being what they are right now, it's also very attractive. So yes, we are aware of the geopolitics, but we also have to mind our own business in respect of what we need to do to ensure that when you go to your commercial bank, you can get foreign US dollars to purchase imports.
Indeed.
If they don't have it, they have to be able to come to our central bank. That is why we need to continue to hold US dollars.
So in other words, what practically works for the region.
Correct.
It's about pragmatism,
not ideology, as you said.
Correct. Indeed. All right, let's go back to another WhatsApp question, Governor. Is it up to the banks to incentivize and encourage more investing as opposed to savings? Is it up to the banks to incentivize more investing as opposed to saving?
No, I think it is up to us. It is our money. The banks don't own the deposits. They hold it in trust for us. They give us a return, which is the minimum savings rate, or whatever rate it is that you negotiate. So it is for us to actually look for additional ways to make our money work for us. And what I'm saying is that you always want to have some savings. Like the gentleman said earlier, you have to put aside for the rainy day, as he did. Commendable. But I am also saying, if you have $10,000, maybe you put $5,000 in savings and you put something into an investment account. You don't have to put everything in investment, but I'm saying you should not necessarily keep all in savings either. You need to find a balance. It is savings and investing. And what we want to see is more of our people move into financial investing.
Okay, indeed. We're going to talk about, Governor, in relation to that matter, the risk-averse nature of the banks. The banks are sometimes one gets the feeling that they're too abstemious. They're far too risk-averse in terms of lending, for example, especially for investment, for private investment. Let's go back to the telephone lines. Good evening, caller. Thank you so much for joining us on Conversation with the Governor. Go ahead, please. Good evening, caller. Your background is very noisy. Good evening, caller.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Good evening to the panel.
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you. I think you need to turn down your television or your radio. It's going to confuse you.
Clearly. Anyway, especially to Governor Antoine. We are happy to have you, sir.
Thank you.
And to your staff, who I know it's not easy to be dealing with everybody with different views and ideas. And we want to thank you, sir, for guarding our money and keeping it safe and protected. I have a issue.
Yes.
Why is it the banks are charging us so much money to change a check if we don't have an account here? Are you aware of that, sir?
Yes, I'm aware that they're charging, and we are concerned about some of the charges.
So you will be doing something about that, Ali will be doing something about it. It's killing us, the poor people, you know.
Yes. So we are, yes, caller, we're very concerned about some of the fees and charges. We've heard. Yes, we are concerned, we are aware, and we are concerned. So what are we doing? We are now working on a proposal. In fact, it's more than a proposal. We already have in principle approval from the Monetary Council to set up an office for financial conduct at the central bank with a financial ombudsman to help to address these concerns and complaints about consumer protection, market conduct, the relationship between customers and their financial institutions. At the moment, the ECCB has no authority in law to intervene on these matters. We may use moral suasion and make a call and try to resolve a situation quietly, but the truth is we have no enforcement ability. We can neither approve fees, not approve fees, adjudicate on certain matters. We are concerned about the proliferation of some of the fees. Yes, the banks do have to make money. We accept that. But in some cases, there are some fees and some very high fees that, frankly speaking, concerns us. And we want to have a framework to provide some kind of rationalization and some kind of adjudication of these concerns about misconduct or, in fact, mistreatment of customers by financial institutions. And this does not just apply to banks. Ultimately, it will also apply to financial institutions like credit unions and finance companies, anybody who has dealings with customers. The customers also have rights, and these rights also have to be respected and protected.
Caller, thank you so much. Caller, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was an excellent point, by the way, in terms of the bank fees.
Yes, indeed.
That has also been a challenge in other parts of the region as well. Another WhatsApp question. Why is investing in cryptocurrency getting so difficult to access in the Caribbean? The banks are restricting purchases of cryptocurrencies. That's an issue that we're going to talk about as well. You want to respond?
Cryptos are a challenge. And I know some of you have gone and invested in cryptos. I say good luck, but I offer caution. One of the reasons why it is so difficult is because cryptos are primarily largely unregulated. So whereas with a digital currency such as issued by the central bank, it is regulated, it is issued by the central bank. We have, a certain framework for anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism. A lot of these cryptos have no such controls, and they certainly are not regulated. And because of recent development, like the collapse of FTX and other crypto exchanges, there's been a crackdown by the US in particular. So if you notice, they just took a position on Coinbase and a couple of these other entities, declaring them to
Binance.
Be unauthorized. Binance, correct. Right. Unauthorized, doing unauthorized securities business in the United States. The reason for that is that people have gotten hurt. People have lost money. So that has caught the attention of regulators. And the view is that you can no longer allow these things to just operate there. Because they're still relatively small in the global scheme of things, there has been a school of thought, just ignore them, let them figure out the fittest will survive, who perish, perish. But when people start losing money, then the public authorities feel a compulsion to act. So that is why you've seen a crackdown on cryptos. More than a year ago, I foresaw we would end up here, because you can't have these unregulated entities operating. And let's be honest, while you want ease of payment and ease of transfer of means of payments and so on, in some cases, some of these cryptos, their business model is predicated on secrecy to the extent that some are being abused or misused for money laundering. And that will not go unnoticed or unchecked. So it is going to be more difficult, not less difficult, frankly, to do cryptos business, because there's a real concern globally among central banks, among governments, among financial authorities, and by people who have lost money complaining that they've lost money. And the thing is, when you're not regulated, there's no recourse.
So the banks are right, you're saying, to
the banks
restricting.
They have to be careful there. So they're not wrong, they're right to be careful with investing in cryptos, because potentially you could lose money, or they could be facilitating money laundering. And that, obviously, they do not want to do.
That is going to hurt them badly with, for example, the correspondent bank relations and so on.
Absolutely correct.
Let's take a last call, Governor. Good evening, caller. Thank you so much for joining us in conversation with the Governor. Go ahead, please.
Good night to the panel. Good night, Governor.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
We have that you're here to actually explain what's really going on in the Caribbean. And more so, when you hear speak about Antigua, in terms of the growth, I'm happy it's coming from you, sir, in terms of our banking as well, some of the large banks in the ECCB, because hearing it from you, sir, and other people, I can say, well, I'm hearing it from the governor. I didn't hear it coming from our prime minister. So now what the governor is saying in terms of how well Antigua is doing in terms of the tourism and so forth coming out of the pandemic, I feel so proud of you, sir, that the governor of the ECCB could come and tell us how well that Antigua has been doing. So I take my hats off to you, sir, and have a good night.
Thank you, and remember us in your prayers, please, sir. Thank you.
Good, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you, caller. Really appreciate it. Caller, Governor, Eastern Caribbean Central Bank exercised its powers under Section 138 of the Banking Act of 2015 in relation to St. Vincent and the Grenadines' First St. Vincent Bank Limited, with effect from the 26th of May. How is that one going?
It's going well. The resolution has proceeded well. So what we did there, it's a fairly small bank, well, a very small bank actually, although the oldest bank in St. Vincent and Grenadines. We had to take steps in there to protect depositors and creditors. So most of the depositors have in fact been transferred to Bank of St. Vincent and Grenadines. And so like 97%, I think it is the number, have been transferred. And that is going quite well. I've checked in and reports from St. Vincent and Grenadines, they're moving forward. Now the other side of it is the receivership for the remaining deposits that are in the receivership. And the receiver is working to ascertain the value of those assets and to be in a position to determine what the distribution will be. But we've worked very closely with the Bank of St. Vincent and Grenadines, the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines, and to date, the resolution is progressing quite well.
To be clear, in Antigua and Barbuda, you mentioned that the banking system, the financial sector is strong and sound, to use your words.
Stable, yes.
Stable. Is there any concern about any of the institutions in Antigua and Barbuda?
We don't have any particular concerns at this time. So we work with our bank's licensees on an ongoing basis. We do on-site inspections all the time. During COVID, we were doing them off-site. Now that we're traveling again, we are constantly in the countries, in the banks, looking at what they're doing. In most cases, we prepare what we call a memorandum of understanding for them to take remedial actions. So every bank will have some remedial actions to take. That is just standard practice. You are excellent, Burford, but I'm sure you have a little room for improvement somewhere.
Always.
Right?
Indeed.
So do I.
Indeed.
In fact, a lot of room for improvement. So
you're being too hard on yourself.
No, in fact. So, we continue to work with our banks. As a general thing, we've been concerned about non-performing loans. In Antigua, it's around 6.7%, which is better than the average. The average in the currency union is actually 12. But what we like to see is NPLs under 5%. So we clearly want to see non-performing loans come down, and we want to see stronger corporate governance. That is something we stress, stronger corporate governance in all our financial institutions. And I will tell you, especially now that indigenous banks control the lion's share of the market, they have to continue to step up their game in respect of corporate governance. So we are on them constantly, monitoring and insisting that they raise their game with respect to corporate governance. And we're not going to shy away from that. That's our job, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, and you'd be derelict in your duty as the financial authority, as a monetary authority and the regulator if you didn't do that
correct.
at all.
Absolutely correct.
Let's go back to WhatsApp, Governor. Since we are service-based economies, shouldn't we be aimed to equalize the U.S. To the EC dollar 1-to-1 instead of 1 to 2.73? Wouldn't this help the citizen purchasing power? So shouldn't it be 1-to-1 as opposed to 1 to 2.7?
Interesting question, caller. What I will say here is that the setting of the parity has to do with the structure of our economy. But to get to the point, because we're out of time, if somehow we were able to reduce that from 1 to 2 or 1 to 1, tourism will become more expensive. We are going to be less competitive for tourism. Do we want to do that? We are small, we are already high price, but we like to think of ourselves as a premium brand, so we could get away with that. But even before tourism, imports will be more expensive. If you think you're seeing inflation now, you're going to see more inflation when imports are more expensive. Then there's the issue about debt. So it's not as simple as purchasing power. Yes, you like the idea of instead of finding 2.7 EC, you have to find 1. But on this flip side, tourism-dependent economies, we are going to be less attractive for tourists because our destinations will become more expensive. On the import side, we're going to be paying more. So I think 2.7 works well for us. But thank you for the question. It's a fair question, and thanks for asking.
It's thought-provoking, at least.
Yeah.
Governor, as we wrap up, the issue of here's another WhatsApp question, and then we'll come to the issue of minimum standards across the commercial banks, because some of the commercial banks, the complaints about the standard level, the level of their service,
yes,
especially the length of time you spend in the bank,
yes,
leaves much to be desired, right? We're
yes,
going to get to that.
Yes.
Regarding saving accounts, is the ECCB saying that 2% interest rate is the minimum for all banks in this union? That's one. Two, is it lawful for any bank in the union to give 0.4% per annum on savings accounts?
If it's a savings account, they must pay you 2%. If they're not paying you 2%, then it means it's not a savings account. I don't know if it's a checking account or some other account. If it's a savings account, it has to be 2%. Now, sometimes the banks say, we don't want any more savings. We can't offer any more savings because they don't want to pay or whatever. That's a policy of the bank. But if it's a savings account, a mandate of the central bank that must be followed by all banks, without exception, you must pay the customer 2%. So if you have a savings account in the bank, you must be getting 2%.
And if the person is
if you're not getting 2%, you
right.
need to report that to us.
Okay.
We need to look into that. So let us be very clear. That 2% is, in fact, the law.
So it's a mandatory minimum.
It's a mandatory requirement.
What about the service standards, Governor, of the banks across the region? Shouldn't the central bank, as the regulator and the monetary authority, be a little bit more scrupulous in terms of monitoring their service standards? Because if you spend half a day in the bank, why shouldn't that be the case?
You know, Garfield, I heard that this week, and that really bothers me. I'm disappointed to hear that. And in fact, we have a meeting with the banks tomorrow. And banks, if you're listening, yes, we were going to ask you about that tomorrow. So I'm giving you a heads up. We have to lift customer service in Antigua and Barbuda. That is not acceptable. People can't be spending a half day and a half morning in a line. One guy said he went into a bank, he saw 5 people, and he said, good, I'm getting out quickly. And he was there for hours. Something is wrong with that. Time is money. We have to do better. I do know that the banks are encouraging people to use digital channels for faster service. And there are instances where you could avoid the lines, and you should avoid the lines. It's like paying your utility bills. Now that you could pay it online, why would you want to go and line up to pay bills? You're wasting your time. So we want to minimize lines where you can use digital channels. But customer service definitely has to be improved. And part of the role of the Office of Financial Conduct will be to look into things like that and ensure that customer service standards. Some of the banks have charters, customer service charters. Are they, in fact, living up to those charters? They have to be held accountable for that. So banks, we have to do better there. You have to do better. And the people are speaking, and you have to listen to that.
In terms of this body that you're trying to set up with a financial, it's called financial ombudsman.
Yes.
When are you looking at the timeline for that?
Well, we expect the proposal, the final form, to go to our Monetary Council probably in February. We did get outline approval in October last year, so we're working now on the design, and then they will have to get a formal approval, and then we have to set it up. So it's going to take a little while to set it up, but we're moving with pace because we know this is an urgent issue. And our thinking is that while it will be headquartered at the central bank, we'll have agents or arrangements in country, in every country, whether it's a regulator in the country like the Financial Services Commission, but somebody or some entity that we can relate to on the ground to be able to receive these things on the ground. So although ECCB is based in St. Kitts and Nevis, one of our 8 member countries, we will have a presence in all 8 countries through designated agencies to be able to channel these complaints or concerns and to have them adjudicated. We have to address those issues. We have to address those issues.
Indeed. A penultimate question, Governor. Dcash, how is it going? Are you satisfied with the take-up of it? Is there an appetite for going digital among the people in the currency union?
There is an appetite for going digital. I'm not satisfied with the take-up yet, but I also have to put up my hand and say we did not market Dcash well when we started. We were so focused on just getting Dcash out in the middle of a pandemic to boot. And then instead of 4 countries for pilot, we actually ended up doing 8 countries. That also stretched us a bit. We've now hired Marketing Machine, a company here in Antigua and Barbuda, to be our partner. We now establishing Salesforce, and we have to pick up the pace of doing that so that you have marketing and sales. But we will, and then there's some additional refinements or improvements to Dcash that are going to come. And then I think we will see even more take-up of Dcash. So it's still early days. When you do these innovations, there's a cycle for adoption. And you have to be patient with that cycle. But we also have to do our part in terms of making sure it's accessible to people. So for example, you have to have more merchants so where people can spend their Dcash. And if you want to cash out from Dcash to physical cash, you have to have merchant tellers. And so there are a number of things that we're working on to build out an infrastructure to support Dcash. We're committed to building that out.
Governor, final question on this, and we're in the next 2 minutes that we have left in the broadcast. The ECCB itself, you have a 5-year strategic vision, strategic plan.
Yes.
It has about 4 or 5 pillars to it.
Yes.
One of them would be, of course, governance and social, environmental responsibility and so on. How are you doing on that? Because the bank itself must be under the scrutiny. In order, you as the regulator and as the monetary authority must be a paragon of virtue almost to show to the commercial banks whom you regulate. So how is the bank doing on its strategic vision?
We're doing well. We're implementing very aggressively our strategic plan. And I will say that not only must we be held accountable, and we are, including why we're here this week, to take questions and to respond to people's questions and to report what we're doing. That's part of our accountability. But I also would say that part of our work is being validated by external recognition of our work. In the last 6 years, we've had 6 global awards. The most recent being this very week in London, when we received an award for ECCB Connects, or weekly podcast. I'm very proud of our team, Marlon, who is here, Marlon Bristol, and the rest of the team, for the hard work they've put in over the last 7 years. When I assumed office, I said we would make the bank more accessible, we would open it up, we would lift the veil, we get people to know what's going on, what we do in their name. We are doing just that, and we plan to do more. That's an example of how we are continuing to work. The children's program, when I was leaving cabinet yesterday, one of the ministers said to me that his grandson listens to this program every month when it comes on with some other 10 or so other children. It was very pleasing to hear. We do it in the name of the children. So we received awards for greening of our campus. Again, moral authority. We're not asking you to do something that we have not done ourselves. Today, we are actually at net zero, meaning that all of our solar electricity needs on the campus are generated from solar PV.
That's in St. Kitts.
At our campus in St. Kitts, with our battery storage having been installed at the end of February. We received 2 awards for that particular project. So we are pushing a strategic plan. I'd like to go even faster, to be quite honest with you. And the pandemic was a setback for all of us, but we are relentlessly pursuing the implementation of a strategic plan, and we do so with the motivation of serving you, the people of the currency union, you, the people of Antigua and Barbuda. For us, it's a pleasure and a privilege to serve. We never take that lightly. We work hard all the time to make sure that we deliver for the people of the currency union. And what is our mandate? Ultimately, transformation, to advance the good of the people of the currency union. And that, of course, includes Antigua and Barbuda.
Will the governor be more accessible for possibly more interviews with members of the media, Governor Antoine? For example, I was trying to reach to the governor a few months ago about the impact, the possible ramifications of some developments in the U.S. Might have been the discussions about a default and so on, but it was difficult. Will the governor be more accessible?
We will be more accessible. I did circulate a note at that moment to our board and council on those developments, and I did consider making a public statement. I was a little concerned that perhaps that would create unnecessary anxiety where there was none to be really had. To be honest with you, what was going on in the U.S. was not directly affecting us. We checked, none of our institutions were directly exposed to Silicon Valley Bank, and therefore, we didn't want to create an issue where there was no issue. We did our homework, we did our due diligence very quickly, and so I did brief our finance ministers, I briefed our board on that. But yes, Mr. Burford, I am committing to be more accessible.
Bravo, bravo to that. Thank you so much, Governor. Really appreciate it. Time flies when we're having fun. We could have had another 2 hours talking about these issues, Indeed. And it would have been just as engaging. We thank you so much.
Thank you, and great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Coming from you, that's really humbling. That's it for our program. We really appreciate your company. Of course, this has been another powerful ABS presentation, conversation with the Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Again, we remind you, everything revolves around the economy. Man is an economic animal. How man organizes to produce the means of his subsistence constitutes a fundamental relations of society. Everything we do revolves around building our economies and producing more of our subsistence. This has been, as I said, a conversation with the governor. We hope that you can, of course, join us for continuing programs. And we ask that you join us for ECCB Connects, which airs on this station. I'm Garfield Burford on behalf of the entire team. Bye-bye.
Feel the rhythm, feel the vibes, 40-40, long time, feel the rhythm, feel feel the vibe with the CCB for a lifetime. ECCB 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Celebrating 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Feel the rhythm, feel the vibes. 40, 40. With the CCB for a lifetime. Everything intact, we making impact with the cash. Digital currency. Quick to react, so we could relax, and that is fact. Reliable. The CCB protects you and me in each and every ECCU country. Strong polymer currency and solar powered energy, oh yeah. ECCB 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Celebrating 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Feel the rhythm, feel the vibes. 40, 40. With the CCB for a lifetime. Always coming through for us, a central bank to trust. 40 with no fuss, can't wait for 40 plus. Education, 40 plus. Wealth creation, 40 tea transformation. The CCB protects you and me in each and every ECCU country. Regional brilliance and vigilance, oh yeah. ECCB 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Celebrating 40, yeah, yeah, long time ago. Feel the rhythm, feel the vibes. 40, 40.